So, in the previous video, I talked about possible races and which of these could be in the game. But what about classes? As I looked up all the different subreddits, websites and more, I figured that the Riot MMO could be so much more than I have ever thought. Again, as mentioned in our latest video, these are just speculation-based ideas mixed with current pieces of information. So give it a go and immerse yourself in it, and of course, let's spark a discussion. We all know how important a good mix of different playstyles, diversity and distinctive abilities is. But how will Riot implement those features without getting out of touch with things that are already functioning properly in other games? I mentioned this quite a lot in our previous videos. Riot is not always forcing itself to create something totally different, but rather building up on already established mechanics. And with all those leaks and little glimpses we currently have, there are quite some things to talk about. And with that, hello people of YouTube, we are Dasher, good to have you here. We just want to say thank you again to all new subscribers, people who liked our content and gave feedback. Even on Discord, we truly enjoyed the discussions about the MMO and more with you guys. We also read every comment and yes, we truly appreciate your time. So if you enjoyed this video, please consider dropping a like and subscribe to this channel, it would mean so much to us. So if Riot Games sticks to the same design as other popular MMORPG titles, we can expect to see a healthy collection of quote-unquote professions or classes that define each player's character. Remember, we try to make it as plausible as possible so that people that are not familiar with the universe get a good overview of what those are. Simultaneously, they will not be an exact copy of their older League of Legends siblings, but rather a so-called quote, evolution of them. Controllers could be a special kind of class, not because the term or class is unknown, no, but because the class itself could be played vastly different than their League of Legends counterparts. As a general explanation, in League of Legends, the controller class assists their allies with potent utilities and keeps enemies at bay with crowd control. Weak when alone, they can massively amplify their teammates' power to become the strongest class in group combat. But if we look into other MMOs, we can clearly see that crowd control classes can be one of the strongest classes if played alone too. And because Riot is notorious for mainstreaming any genre they touch, this could be also true for the MMO. But don't get me wrong, mainstreaming games isn't bad. Some people might argue that this is not healthy, but I tend to disagree. Most of those just want to be the elite for whatever reason. A small circle that makes it artificially difficult for new players to get into the game. And that, to me, is a no-go. Giving more people access to a game and incorporating familiar mechanics is best for a healthy player base and growth. And Riot is known for giving new players an easier time getting into their games. So with that out of the way, controllers could be one of the most fun to play classes in the game. The ability to help your friends and allies and control a whole battlefield can be such an awesome experience and joy to play. And if we dive deeper into what the controller class has to offer, we can see two subclasses of it, the Catcher and Enchanter. I already mentioned helping your friends and allies, but that doesn't mean just the ability to only control the battlefield, but rather to support them differently. The Enchanter could buff the allies or give shields and even movement speed. And while the Enchanter is totally capable of healing the allies in League of Legends, I think they will have more of a buffing role in the MMO. And with the information we currently have, namely, and I quote Ghostcrawler here, if you want to play a game with a community, with friends, then play our MMO, then the controller class could be one of the most important classes when it comes down to group content. And with group content, I mean raids and dungeons. Ghostcrawler already confirmed that raids and dungeons will be in the game, and with the emphasis on playing together, controller classes, in my honest opinion, could thus be one of the most needed classes in the game when people search for raiding groups, if, of course, these quote-unquote speculative skills will make it into the game. They could, like I said earlier, shield their allies, and while they're shielded, they could receive more movement and attack speed. I can also see the Enchanter using skills that grant them immunity to certain status effects. One of those abilities could be called Hold Your Ground. It grants your target immunity to frozen, chilled and stun effects for 5 seconds. And in my opinion, This could be very useful if you already know the mechanic of a boss fight. So if an enchanter times their skills right, they can help their allies to do more consistent damage. Because if you think about it, every time a dungeon or raiding group has to go out of an AoE effect, they lose damage output. And with skills like this, a well-organized group can use those to be more consistent overall. Furthermore, enchanters could slow and polymorph the enemy so they can't reach you or your allies. As example skills, I have the following two. Ice Dome. A chilling gust surrounds you to the point it freezes your own magical armor. While in Ice Dome, nearby enemies get slowed down and have a chance to freeze if get caught inside. Another skill of the enchanter could be Tranquility. With this skill, you are able to leap over a target and deal damage and set slow. And this skill requires a shield, and while the enchanter is focused on giving shields to themselves and their allies, this could be an interesting strategy if used correctly. Not only that, but it would also give the enchanter a bit more, depth. Obviously, this is just one skill of many, but I try to point out the potential of named classes. And while the enchanter is more focused on helping allies and slowing enemies, the catcher could be even more focused on the crowd control part. But let's not forget one thing though. I'm aware that there are some classes in League of Legends that are out of line. What I'm trying to do here is to find the best way to fit those into an MMO environment. And that's exactly why I said at the beginning of the video, let's spark a discussion. There's no 100% right or wrong here, we can all contribute to this video. And with that in mind, I would be happy to read your ideas in the comments below, and you are also welcome to join the Discord. Since the start of the channel, we've built up a small but very welcoming community. There we chat about the MMO, other games, and so on. So yeah, you're more than welcome to join. So the catcher is a hard one for the MMO, mainly because you could give them basically any weapon and they could fight with it, similar to League of Legends. But for that reason, I'll focus more on the unique class abilities instead of the weapon skills. But I also mentioned earlier that crowd control classes could be very effective if played as a solo player, because if we take a look at League of Legends for a little inspiration, the best example of that is Pyke. He's a mix between a controller and a slayer. So starting off lightly, the catcher will most likely possess skills that deal damage while also debuffing and of course controlling enemies. One of these could be Order. So while you attack with the skill, you aim at the most vital limbs of the enemy. This results in knocking down the enemy for 3 seconds while also reducing its physical resistance by 20% for 10 seconds. Of course, a skill like this won't work on bosses though, but it will work on elite enemies, or should I say stronger enemies. A very good skill for yourself while fighting, like I said earlier, stronger, but as well as weaker enemies. Furthermore, Correlation could be also a name for a skill. This one deals damage to enemies in a cone. Enemies hit suffer from weakness and remorse. When weakness is applied, your enemy will lose the ability to sprint for 3, 5 and 7 seconds respectively for each level in that skill, while also losing the ability to hit hard. That means the enemy will lose 10% attack power due to remorse. So skills like this complement the aforementioned effectiveness as a solo player while also staying true to the roots of a controller class. Remember, I will always give you 1 or 2 skills as a kind of, reference. I researched more than I would have thought and I tried my best to give these skills their own identity. And for that reason, it's far better to give you a little overview instead of throwing plenty of ideas at you. This is mostly for showing what each class could be capable of. As for the AoE side of skills, there could be a skill that is called Cursed Crater. This skill deals damage over time while also inflicting permanent remorse on enemies inside of it, even if they have physical armor. So basically, reducing the enemy's attack power by 10%. What is so special about this skill is that an ally near the crater can activate a synergy, dealing magical or physical damage to all enemies held within it, depending on what the catcher has skilled more. Not only would this once again strengthen the group, but it would also be very fitting to the previously mentioned help your friends and allies and control a whole battlefield part. So, stun locking enemies and bursting out damage as fast as possible seems like a great playstyle for many people and a viable option for solo as well as group content, to be honest. The fascinating part about classes in the League of Legends universe is that some champions have 2 classes, just like I mentioned earlier with Pyke. and that could be also an important aspect, namely multiple class choices. Maybe Riot will give us 2 classes to choose from, one at the start of the game and another after we reach a certain level. And to be honest, this idea isn't even so far-fetched, since several games already demonstrate such a mechanic. Slayers, on the other hand, are highly mobile champions who specialize in single target burst damage, as I kinda explained earlier. But of course, this is for League of Legends specifically. Slayers are your typical high-risk, high-reward class. It also has 2 subclasses, namely the Assassin and the Skirmisher. While it seems similar at first glance, they could have totally different playstyles. While the Assassin is your high-burst damage dealer that engages quickly, does a lot of damage, and disengages after that, the Skirmisher is a different type of subclass. For the MMO specifically, I could imagine that the Assassin will have a lot of spells that help you with your squishiness, like invisibility for a short period of time, spells that activate invisibility while you make your first attack, and so on. On the other hand, this subclass could easily have skills that grant you iframes, like dodging, going invisible for a second, and so on. For everyone who doesn't know what an iframe is, this is the abbreviation of intraframe, or for better understanding, invincibility frame, a single-time unit in video games during which a character cannot be hurt or get debuffed. While in an iframe, yeah, that's the bad part, you cannot attack either. Furthermore, this class could potentially excel in doing crit damage, so the higher your crit damage, the better. This is because the Assassin could be squishy and cannot rely on longer fights. So your ideal playstyle would be to attack a single target, do a lot of damage in a short time, and then disappear into the shadows again. And while the MO will have a lot of group content, these classes could shine while you fight, for example, mini-bosses or elite enemies as well. So basically, clearing these in a short amount of time while being able to avoid attacks. Also, a very important aspect is thinking tactically, because it's a crucial part of playing this class effectively, with way of the Assassin short cooldown and powerful abilities to reset cooldowns. And while yes, some games already showed us a backstabbing mechanic, I think this could be even more of a thing in the Riot MMO, mainly because they will improve upon their combat and hopefully upon their engine as well. And with that in mind, backstabbing could be a core mechanic utilized by the Assassin. As the class revolves entirely around the use of their daggers, it is also important to position your character wisely to get the most out of this mechanic. Furthermore, all of the Assassin skills scale off weapon damage, so it's crucial to keep your weapons up to date. And when it comes down to skills, the Assassin could have a healthy collection of skills that help them with their backstabbing mechanic. One of them could be the Null Zone. While the enemy is inside of it, they will get silenced. When an enemy is silenced, they can no longer cast magical abilities. This is a very powerful skill, but at the same time it needs good class knowledge to pull that off, for example in a PvP environment. Another reason why an Assassin class is easy to learn but hard to master could be a skill which I would call Fatal Drift. This skill allows the Assassin to generate combo points, which stacks up to 3 times. Just for this example, at 3 combo, you may activate the skill to use your combo points in order to enhance your next skill. In addition to that, a perfect skill could be called Deadly Rush. Deadly Rush obliterates a target and does 125% weapon damage. Furthermore, it deals plus 75% additional damage if used from invisibility, and that's where combo comes into play. The combo could be something like become invisible before damage is dealt. So if you use it wisely and you know how to play your class, skills like those could be crazy strong. But at the same time, this needs one requirement. You have to be willing to learn the class. The Skirmisher, on the other hand, is a bit different. They could be also called the Light Fighter, because they don't excel in durability or burst, but rather in their ability to take on individual enemies or small groups by clever use of their mobility and defensive tools. In the MMO, they could be also called the Spectre class. Let me explain. The class itself is like a duelist. They are mostly close-range champions that deal a lot of damage while building offensively. At the same time, the Spectre gets their defense from class mechanics instead of raw stats, and could also use these to heal allies or debilitate enemies. Basically someone who can fight or trade frequently with the enemy and be a helping hand for their allies too. In the wiki, the Skirmisher is described as, and I quote, They are instead armed with situationally powerful defensive tools to survive in the fray, along with extreme sustained damage to cut down even the most durable targets. And for that reason, a skill could look like this. Dreadful. In the target area of Dreadful, you inflict conditions on foes and gain a specific buff for each target struck. Furthermore, heal yourself and grant yourself a buff that enhances your damage output based on the number of targets struck. So if we look into what Riot is always doing, namely building up on already existing things, then this could be the perfect counterpart for the Assassin. A class that doesn't have the highest burst damage like the Assassin, but can withstand a bit longer in fights while being a supporter or debuffer at the same time. I could also imagine that the Spectre could work with skills that allow them to enfeeble the target. That would imply that heals that got cast on enemies who are struck by the skill are instead converted into damage. Enemies who are affected by the skill are afflicted with reduced movement speed and accuracy as well, and it would also apply a stack of bleeding. So the Skirmisher could not only be an answer to healers in a PvP environment, but it will also help in PvE too, because I can think of many instances where Riot could introduce healing phases of enemies or even bosses as a mechanic. I also mentioned earlier the extreme sustained damage from Skirmishers. This is why bleeding or some kind of agony damage is a key to success for this class. Bleeding and agony, of course, could always be replaced by other status effects, but for this video, I'm using these as an example. Additionally, a fitting skill in combination with Dreadful could be Alertness. Alertness gives yourself and a nearby ally a 30, 40 and 50% dodge chance and 15% movement speed respectively of the duration you are inside of Dreadful, as long as you doing damage inside of it as well. So you need to do damage inside of that area while also trying to stay in there. So the longer a fight takes, the stronger a Skirmisher could be. And while this sounds awesome, you have to pay attention to your build and how to play your class. Very different from the Assassin, while also being lethal. The tank is for most of you a common term and seems normal at first glance. But hold on, the tank in the Riot MMO could be also a bit different. In League of Legends we have the Vanguards and the Wardens. And while the Vanguard is a more of an offensive-oriented tank, the Warden class is a purely defensive one. Remember, everything I say here is just speculation and is by no means bound to League of Legends alone. The Vanguard could be easily a class that stuns and slows enemies with their abilities and could be also skilled as a quote off-tank. An off-tank is someone unable to quote-unquote face tank a boss alone, but does slightly more damage, and they also have some unique skills in their repertoire. Basically, quote-unquote face tanking means standing directly in front of an enemy and taking all of their attacks with little effort while drawing the aggro of said target away from these squishier party members like assassins and mages. And while the Vanguard could stun and slow enemies, they could also mark them. And this could fit perfectly with the aforementioned off-tanking. It is a very unique ability because marking enemies would be a game changer in any raid if done correctly. The ability to mark could help allies to do significantly more damage either for a certain amount of time or until the marks are consumed. Because think about it, an off-tank that takes the work of the main tank when things get too dicey, but is still equipped with powerful skills to want to have them in every dungeon or raid party. They could also possess a variety of defensive tools, namely shields but maybe banners too. These banners could work similarly to banners in Guild Wars 2, where the Vanguard has to place a banner on the ground that grants bonus attributes such as more vitality or more defense to you and nearby allies in that area. Picking up the banner could also reduce the recharge of the skill. So Vanguards have a unique position in group content. This role could be easily the hardest in the MMO because of the constant critical thinking it requires. Off-tanks must be passive yet aggressive. Think in the present but also in the future. An off-tank player is best defined by the ability to master critical decision-making for abilities with very constructive cooldowns. They have to be very cautious about the battlefield in group content. Not only do they have to mark the boss in a room, but they could also be always on the lookout for elite mobs that spawn during the fight, so that they can tank those and defend their allies from incoming damage. In combination with the main tank, they could be a force to be reckoned with. They basically shine in every group environment. And while we are talking about the main tank, the Warden will be the best answer to this. Wardens are defensive tanks and they could be the definition of face tanking enemies. Therefore, the most used ability of the Wardens would be their taunts. While at first this might sound boring for someone, the Warden is also equipped with many defensive buffs and shields for themselves and their allies. For example, shields could be quite big, therefore a bit weaker, but could work as a surrounding shield for allies, or shields that give the Warden an advantage when fighting bosses. We can already see similar ones in League of Legends as well. Quote, shields himself and the target ally champion for 2.5 seconds, binding them with Bastion. The shield in the MO, for example, could fortify allies with a minor heal, or could give them a chance to evade some attacks if the taunt of the Warden runs out. As for self buffs, a Warden could have a skill that grants them a so-called perfect block, which negates incoming damage completely. But of course, this skill would only last for 2 to 4 seconds, with a 30 to 40% chance to trigger. Very useful for boss fights too, but at the same time it's hard to pull that off because of the chance. And speaking of boss fights, there could be one skill, namely Resonate, and I honestly would love to see such a mechanic. Resonate is an ancient meditation technique that stores power from your enemy attacks. It basically works like this. Obtain resonation every time you are attacked by an enemy. For every resonation tier, you'll increase the gain of your resonance to strengthen your body and increase your constitution and armor. For me, this ability would be the absolute highlight of the game if I were playing a tank. It could allow for a completely different approach to taunting enemies. In most games, the taunt ability is used to protect your allies. Here, however, it could go a long way towards making the tank more unique. So basically, you kill two birds with one stone. You help your allies, and at the same time, you would get an advantage if you taunt correctly. And while we're speaking of helping allies, another skill that could make the tank more unique could be called Carry the Burden. This skill could protect allies in range, allowing the Warden to take a percentage of the incoming damage for them. But yeah, there could be certain exceptions to this though. Of course, like I said multiple times now, this is just speculation and you are more than welcome to join and discuss all of this with us here or on our Discord as well. As for Discord, we're trying our best to make it a hub for like-minded people, and hopefully we may welcome you there soon too. So if there's anything you want to add, let us know, because we try our best to listen to feedback because it helps to make a better channel for the future. Like always, we would truly appreciate a like and a sub if you like the content. So thank you if you're doing so. Mages are classes who typically possess great reach, ability-based area of effect damage, or in short AoE, and crowd control. They are also the ones that use all of these strengths in tandem with each other to trap and destroy enemies from a distance. But not only that, the term mage could be so much more. Classes with the ability to control creatures, or simply classes that buff and heal their allies. In League of Legends, we have three types of mages: the Battle Mages, Burst, and the Artillerist class. For this video, I focus only on the first two because later in the video, there's another class that I think fits better into the MMO instead of the Artillerist. Battle Mages in League of Legends are, a hot topic, because many people have the opinion that Battle Mages have been steadily stripped of their identity. But for the MMO, it could be a great thing to start them over in a totally different way, or even bring them back. They could easily be called Warlocks for the sake of immersion. While the Warlock is not the squishiest mage class in the game, its defense is not the best, but what they lack in defense, they make up for in offense and debuffs. And yes, I know that in League of Legends, Battle Mages have significant defensive capabilities that range from sustaining endlessly to literally defying death for a short period of time. But let's view this a bit differently, because the MMO is built around PvE and PvP content, so this could be a bit too much. The Warlock could be the best mix of two worlds, and will be most likely the best AoE trapper class in the game. While this sounds complicated at first, it is easy to understand. In short, kill the mob before it reaches you. I mean, I guess that could be technically the truth for every class, but yeah, let's continue. They create traps that, when triggered, cause damage and fear effects. The fear effect could be described as an ability that makes it much harder for the opponent to reach the player. So, for example, opponents could be slowed down or lose their orientation for a short time, probably 1 to 4 seconds. And while this sounds strong at first, which it is by the way, it is also reliant on the caster's talent to place the traps perfectly for the enemies to step into. Basically a high risk, high reward class. But the Warlock is also reliant on its mana, and because Warlock casts more spells at a time than some other classes, it drains much quicker, and that is where Corpse Drain comes into play. This skill could technically help you refill your mana with, yeah, as the name implies, draining corpses. So it's a hard class to play, but at the same time extremely rewarding when you can. And now to the best part of the Warlock, the group play. As I mentioned earlier, the Warlock has a great variety of debuffs, because the Warlock could be a very strong ally not because of its direct damage, but also by helping the other party members deal more by keeping the mobs debuffed. One skill could be called Weakened Skin, which allows allies to deal more damage whilst the target's defense is decreased. And for the PvP fans out there, yeah, I didn't forget you, another could be called Magic Skin. This skill could be a self-buff that decreases incoming physical attack damage by consuming mana instead of health. So you can see that the Warlock could not only be a strong ally, but is also a strong class to be reckoned with. And speaking of a strong class to be reckoned with, the League of Legends Burst class is exactly the right match. For the MMO, they could be similar to the League of Legends counterpart, but my guess is that they won't be called Burst, but rather Sorcerer because of the skills in the MMO and so on. The wiki describes them as, and I quote, burst mages that aim to single out vulnerable targets by locking them down and following up with a devastating barrage of damage from range. They are strongest when using their full suite of spells executed perfectly to maximum effect, and most vulnerable when they cannot deliver. And this is an interesting thing, namely full suite of spells executed perfectly to maximum effect, like the Warlock, a high risk, high reward class with a specialization on burst and single target damage. But also for the MMO, this could mean that this class has to kill to reduce cooldown times for specific skills. So all in all, straightforward damage with a little twist. And while the Warlock could be the best damage over time AoE class in the game, the Sorcerer or Burst shines in burst AoE damage to clear rooms of trash mobs in an instant. I guess you get the idea, because skills like Meteor Strike could be easily a skill of a Sorcerer, while the Warlock has skills that tick over time. Although this class kills mobs in a matter of seconds, it is also the squishiest class in the whole game. After all, it is a raw damage dealing class without hidden gimmicks. So if you want to be the hardest hitting truck in all of the Riot's MMO, go for it. But remember, keep your distance at all costs, because otherwise, yeah, you know. And speaking of distance, here's a class that could be great for the MMO and absolutely fits the previous sentence. The Summoner. The Summoner has mastered the ability to control creatures at will. If you take the already mentioned, and I quote myself here, multiple class choices into consideration, then maybe the Summoner could be an extension of the Mage's class. Obviously, with increased stats built around pets, it makes the Battle Summoner a powerful force to be reckoned with. The Summoner specializes in offensive pet-related buffs and abilities, while at first, being only able to summon just one pet, the Summoner is later able to summon even more, of course, with a limit. The interesting part of a Summoner is the diversity, because its pet choices are also highly dependent on the weapon and role choices the Summoner chooses. For example, a Staff Summoner will almost always pick a ranged pet over a melee one, because the Summoner also attacks from range. So having a pet that needs to be in melee range of the mob will not fulfill the abilities the Summoner desires from a pet when the pet has to manually run into melee range. I guess you get the idea. So combining the playstyle of the player itself with the pet ones could be extremely fun while also rewarding. But not only that, it could also lead to many different playstyles within the player base. Players that choose to be Staff Summoners deal slightly more damage, or could deal slightly more damage, but also have less HP than their melee counterparts. Within the MMO, the melee Summoner could be called Beastmaster. These deal less damage but are capable of transferring a percentage of the incoming damage to their pets. And while this sounds almost tanky at first, it is more of a helping hand when fighting in melee range. But of course, even if players will find a way to use this class as a tank one, this would be awesome in my opinion, because so many developers are afraid of trying things out, and I sincerely hope that Riot is not one of those. I mean, yeah, you can balance things out, but let people try things out with their classes. Give them the ability to mix and match skills. You can always nerf these skills later in the game if it turns out too strong. And while we talk about nerfing, you could nerf the strong ability of dual or triple summon by draining the caster's mana a bit. So, for example, for every additional pet you summon, the more mana it drains each second. You could counter that a bit with stronger skills later in the game, but still, this would balance things out a lot in my opinion. So, basically, this class has to micromanage, and this is fine. Don't be afraid to let people try things out. Yes, make your game easier to get into, but make it even more rewarding for the player to test their class. Furthermore, a great addition for the summoner would be also skill converting. For example, converting a percentage of your pet's max attributes into damage, or a skill that has a chance to increase the attack speed of your pet by a certain amount, but when this effect is granted, it also consumes mana for the time being. Combining this with gear sets and other stuff that helps to build your character can bring so much joy into the game. It gives the whole thing diversity. Do you want to be more of a damage-dealing staff summoner or more of a supportive one? And speaking of support, we should not forget one of the most important classes in the game, the healer class. Healer classes have many different names. In some games, they're called bards, while in others, priests and so on. For simplification, let's call them clerics. Why not? While in League of Legends, the enchanter class possesses the ability to heal a bit, it could be different for the MMO. Or should I say, the class that is capable of healing much more than others could be the cleric. So the cleric's abilities are the literal definition of healing and helping your allies to the max. But of course, it wouldn't be a Dasher video if we wouldn't put our own ideas in it. There are multiple ways of healing in League of Legends, but for an MMO it has to be a bit different. For an MMO you need two types of heals, namely the instacast heals and the heal over time skills, or in short, HOT. While the first one heals you for a great amount in a short time, the HOTs can potentially heal you much greater, but like the name implies, only over time. But not only that, my guess is that the healer will also have some buffs up their sleeve. While other classes could, like I explained earlier, buff your attack damage or defense, the healer will be able to buff primary attributes like intelligence or strength. Furthermore, special attention should be paid to moving around. Clerics are extremely squishy and so they need to increase their chances of living to keep basically everyone else alive. So hypothetically speaking, if the MMO would have an action combat style, the healer class is not an easy one, but extremely rewarding not only for you, but also for group content if done right, because knowing how to play a healer also makes the other players good damage dealers as well. So for people that like healing classes, nothing ever compares to the sheer adrenaline rush of keeping their teammates alive under heavy pressure. And trust me, I speak of experience. As for the skills, the healer needs to have ones that makes playing a healer exciting and needed in group content. They could have skills that increase the health regeneration of the entire group while continuously consuming mana while active. On the other hand, they could have the so-called panic button. Just for example, let's call it Miracle. This skill sacrifices all of your mana to restore full health for all party members. It also could prevent you from replenishing mana for 5 seconds. I know that people would say, Dasher, this sounds too strong, but hear me out. In combination with the action combat, this could be pretty darn interesting. If you truly cast that spell, you need a moment to get mana back, and while fighting against bosses for example that have crazy rotations or skill sets, this could lead to a complete wipe if done wrong. In addition to that, if the game will be truly action combat, skills that increase special attributes of all party members within range could be also very rewarding if done correctly, because you always need an overview of where to move while simultaneously keeping track of all your allies. So you see, there are many possibilities for the healer class. Instead of just pressing 1 or 2 buttons, you instead need to be focused on your task. And to be honest, this is what I would call an important group role. While in League of Legends, every champion that is equipped with ranged weapons is called marksman, my guess is that for the MMO this could be a totally different story. While yes, there will possibly be the so-called marksman, but on the other hand, the term is so commonly used that it could mean literally everything. But for the simplification of it, let's focus on two classes here, the Ranger and the Gunslinger. While the Ranger's choice of weapons is the bow or crossbow, the Gunslinger is more focused on guns, as of course the name implies. We even have many of them in the League of Legends universe, and to be honest, I don't know why Riot never split the marksman category into two separate branches. The Ranger is your typical Ranger, but what's interesting about them is that they could have a faster attack speed than the Gunslinger, but also great control of threats. But what do I mean by great control? Well, the Ranger could have a companion by its side all the time. Yes, I'm looking at you, Guild Wars 2. I like this idea so much that I had to implement it. But what does this even have to do with control? So while your pet could aggro the enemies, you could have the time to cast spells like Net or Crippling Shot. So the enemy doesn't even have time to get to you for a brief moment. This could also be an interesting thing when combining this skill with skills like Caltrops, where you throw them in front of your enemy so that they take damage and get slowed down as well. But not only is this a great way to play solo, but also for group content too. Because this skill could allow full damage classes to focus all of their skills on one spot without the fear of enemies quickly moving away. And before someone says, "Hey Dasher, but the tank class has the taunt ability." Well, yes, but I can imagine that Riot tries to spice raids and dungeons up. So even if you have taunt skills, some fights might not work out like planned. And thus, the Ranger class could be also a very viable class, not only for soloing, but also for group content. I would also love to see a skill that allows your arrows to fly with enough force to knock the armor off your enemies, and thus increases the amount of physical defense your attacks ignore by a percentage of your dexterity. Furthermore, that would inspire you to min-max as a player, and you would think a lot more about your build, because if you already see skills in your skill tree that are related to dexterity, then you automatically skill them. Not only does it make it easier to get into the class, but it also makes the player think about it way more. And while the Ranger could be an awesome class for every bow-loving player out there, something is missing for the people who love pistols and rifles. And that's where the Gunslinger comes into play. They use acrobatic agility to quickly move around the battlefield, positioning themselves to inflict the most damage upon their enemies. Gunslingers are these hard-hitting, gun-wielding acrobats that shine the most when fighting one enemy after another. And those deadly abilities, coupled with steely-eyed resolve, make the Gunslinger a truly frightening foe in battle. This class could mark the enemies to do the most damage possible. I believe that this class will be one of the most hard-hitting classes in the game when it comes to dealing burst damage to a single target. The biggest difference of the Ranger and the Gunslinger is the damage by the Gunslinger, and that this class could have a very high skill ceiling when it comes to mastering the class. And while yes, they have fast attack speed and high damage, they can also change their toolkit to have different ups and downsides for you to choose from. And these toolkits could be their utility belts. These belts provide a different set of playstyles for your gameplay. You can be fast with high dexterity at the cost of damage, or be a heavy hitter at the cost of your health and movement speed. These belts could come in 3 different qualities called light, medium and heavy, and could be available at level 20, 30 and 40 respectively. In addition, this class could have different stances, where you have to switch your weapons more than other classes to do the most damage possible. If we consider champions like Caitlyn, then I could also imagine that we could have similar abilities to Guild Wars 2. For example, skills like Kneel, where you become immobile and gain access to kneel skills while holding a rifle, which increases the projectile velocity of your abilities as long as you are in that stance. While the bullet velocity is increased, you are not only able to do slightly more damage, but also have a much higher crit chance. Makes perfect sense to me because you are unable to move and your character is way more concentrated or focused on the target. But of course, like everything here, there's a lot of room for interpretation when it comes to skills like this, because skills like this need perfect timing, but if you manage to do it right, then you will be rewarded for it. This could make the playstyle much more distinctive in comparison to the Rangers. I would also love to see abilities such as Bullet Rain, where this skill increases your attack speed for a short time while also reducing your health and single shot damage. In addition, this could work wonders with the aforementioned belts. One of these belts could be called Belt of Madness. This belt is stuffed with a spiraling serum that is constantly injected into its wearer's body, greatly improving stamina during combat actions. However, the body itself becomes fragile as a side effect of this serum. So with all those different skills, the Gunslinger wouldn't feel so boring, and you as a player would have a wide range of playstyles to pick what you think seems best. Of course, hard-hitting skills like these also need downsides, but in my opinion, something like the different stances is already hard to master because you need great timing to do it right, and the Gunslinger is very squishy too. And with the addition of the belt, a Gunslinger has to be very mindful about when they use a belt and when they would rather think twice about it. Of course, this is just speculation, and you can visit our Discord to discuss videos like these with the community and of course us in private. So if there's anything you want to add, let us know. We always listen to feedback because it helps to make a better channel. Like always, we would also appreciate a like and a sub if you like the content, so like I said earlier, thank you if you're doing so. So to master such a class like the Gunslinger, it needs time and skill, but if you manage to do it, no one is gonna stop you, let me tell you that. And speaking of no one's gonna stop you, let's get on with the fighter. In League of Legends, you have two types of fighters, the divers and the juggernauts. While the diver in current League of Legends is a more mobile portion of the fighter class, the juggernaut excels at both dealing and taking significant amount of damage, but in turn they have a tough time closing in on targets due to their low range and extremely limited mobility. And while yes, some might argue that the juggernaut has mobility, keep in mind that in an MMO environment, a so-called dash wouldn't be the same as movement speed. But let's focus more on the MMO here. While some of these classes, like the divers, have also sustain, mobility and some sort of evasion skills, in an MMO it's important that you have different classes. So let's distance ourselves a little from League of Legends here to make both classes distinctive of each other. As for divers, the difference here is that a juggernaut enters a fight and wants to stay in the fight as long as possible, benefiting greatly from long and drawn-out fights, while the divers are designed to go in, single out a target and leave. While the wiki says, and I quote, "Fighters tend to have an advantage against assassins, whose burst tends to fall short of killing them when unaided, as well as tanks, whose inferior damage allows fighters to eventually defeat them in duels, I think they will be way more unique, because, like I said, you cannot compare an MMO to League of Legends." Divers in the MMO could be very powerful physical damage-based warriors, but with lower crit chance as well as crit damage than the assassins or skirmishers to balance things out, of course. They must manage their resources, which is mainly stamina, but they don't have to worry too much about running out of their resources like mages because stamina regenerates at a faster rate. But they still must be careful because stamina is also used for parrying and dodging. Furthermore, I would love to see that the diver could unlock a passive skill or ability that is called Fury, for example. This passive ability allows your character to gain Fury with different skills. So you would gain one level of Fury for activating different skills, and each level of Fury reduces your magical and physical resistance, but increases your damage and critical chance. So Fury is built around doing more damage while also receiving more. Basically, the Fury system would help a lot to get the most out of your class, because the next part could work extremely well with Sett's system, namely chaining, where you can chain your abilities fluently and do combos. Combos could work wonders in combination with Fury, because if you want to get the most out of your character, you need to cast skills, and with the combo system this would allow a good player to build Fury very fast. After all, if you're able to master the combos, you could be an unstoppable force. The best part about this is that the earlier set skills are not bound to a specific playstyle. With Fury and chaining, you could wield all kinds of weapons, from swords to axes to literally spears. Another important reason that this could be great is that the system itself is very simple to understand and easy to learn. The idea is that you would have one combo and Fury at the beginning of the game. This would help you a lot to learn these mechanics and build on them, while also learning new ones every 5 or 10 levels. So an easy class to learn, but a hard one to master. And speaking of mastering, the diver could have an active ability like Rush that helps you to reduce the cooldowns of casting certain skills by 5 to 15 seconds respectively. And if used correctly in combination with chaining, this could be immensely powerful while also hard to pull off. Furthermore, Rush can be used at any time but is most effective in the right hands. When using Rush at the right moments, it could skip a complete skill cooldown, but of course only at higher levels. The reason behind this is this would make the class much more interesting and viable for people who like to play a warrior class, as they would have to engage with that class in late game as well. And fitting to most of the wiki descriptions for the diver, they definitely should have a skill set that increases their movement speed. For example, use a stack of Fury for Warcry. Warcry increases your movement speed by 20% and your basic attacks and skills deal 5% more damage for each Fury consumed. Additionally, your critical attack deals 50% more damage for 5 seconds, so the diver could have many skills that resolve around buffing their attack power but decreases their defense at the same time. This would give the, in quote, MMO diver a bit of an own character and more depth for an open world game in my opinion. Furthermore, it would fit very well with the counterpart from League of Legends, since some divers, as mentioned earlier, have movement speed skills. Additionally, similar to Warwick's Eternal Hunger, the diver class could have a life-stealing skill to counteract the debuffs a little bit. Keep in mind that in the MMO, it could be a bit different in order to fit the different playstyles of PvE as well as PvP. For example, Bloodlust, which would cost 1 Fury to receive 50% lifesteal for the next 2 skills. This might help the diver a bit in a fight without surviving too long if you mess up. So the class isn't nearly as strong as the Juggernaut when it comes to sustaining and survivability. And speaking of the Juggernaut, yeah, this is kind of a tricky one. Even more than the diver. I know that the Juggernaut class has an quote-unquote identity crisis, as others would call it. But like all the other classes before, let's focus on the main thing here. That is the MMO and what could be a possibility in the MMO. Like I said earlier, they excel at both dealing and taking a significant amount of damage, but on the other hand are extremely slow and bulky with very few mobility options. So they could have immense powerful toolkits like AoE crowd and zone control and immense burst damage once they close the gap. I can also see the Juggernaut having different stances that negate certain effects with this description in mind. And while the Juggernaut is a good mix between both worlds, I can certainly see them having passive skills that reduce all incoming damage when their health is below 10% or less by 20% for 10 seconds. This would work fantastically in my opinion since it's a slow class. So there will be moments where skills like this will become in handy. And because the Juggernaut has a harder time closing the gap, it is also highly possible that they will have skills that decrease the movement speed of their enemies by 80% or more for 4 to 5 seconds. If we look into League, Trundle already has similar skills like this, namely Chomp, where he deals bonus physical damage and slows the target by 75% for 0.1 seconds. And speaking of closing the gap, I know all of this is just speculation, but still, I think the Juggernaut could easily possess a skill that is called Fortitude. This skill would make you immune to most physical crowd control effects and increases your damage in exchange for heavily reduced movement speed. That would not only fit the MMO in my opinion, but would also be in line with the already existing description of the Juggernaut and their movement speed. So it's not like the Juggernaut has the same defensive capabilities as the tank class, but is still able to pull off some great self-sustain. So again, a class that is easy to get into, but a bit harder to master. So as some of you see, I tried my best to give you some ideas for playable classes. Of course, all of this is just speculation based on the information we currently have. And as always, it is also partly my point of view. Things can change, please keep that in mind. And as I mentioned earlier, we are always curious about what you guys think. Is there some specific class or even something totally different that you would like to see in the upcoming MMO? Please tell us in the comments below, because we would love to exchange thoughts and ideas with you, because no matter how old or how young, you can always learn something new. And I guess that's what it's all about. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from us again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go, and if you click the bell icon next to it, you'll get notified every time we'll upload a new video, so you won't miss any new videos like this. As always, thank you for watching. This is Dasher, dashing into the next one. Peace.